fools.
Everybody, Sean here with galleryss Photography. I've got an interesting setup for you here. I just came from a nice walk outside, being socially distant and all the other fun stuff in our modern age, with my Mavic Air 2 drone. Now in this case, I actually landed it on top of a garbage bin, and I decided just for myself to figure out, does increasing the megapixels on the Mavic Air 2 affect low light capability. These two shots are taken at a 1 second exposure. It is an ISO 400, f2.8 on both, and let's quickly zoom in here and you guys can take a look at this. So which one is 12 megapixel and which one is 48 megapixel? If you're anything like me, you're going to quickly identify that the 48 megapixel shot is the one on the right, because you can definitely see a lot more detail in the wheel well. But that is not quite the whole story. But let me get you to that story real quick here. So let's pan over here. I'm going to set these two shots side by side. And once again, looking at these two shots side by side, the one on the right is clearly the 48 megapixel image. It has way more detail in this little leaf that's sticking out here out of the shrubbery. So you might say to yourself, okay, well, that's pretty much what's expected, right? So if you've got 48 megapixel setting on the Mavic Air 2, you're going to get a higher resolution image. Right. That's what I thought too, until I started looking in the shadows. So let's take a look at the top of this sign here. And this is where it starts to get more interesting. I'm going to zoom out on both and retarget this sign here. So keep in mind, the picture that's on the right is a 48 megapixel image at 100%. This is a raw file, DNG. The one on the left is a 12 megapixel DNG. And look at the difference. Even though the picture that's on the left is zoomed in twice as much, so it's at 200% versus 100% on the right, it is still cleaner with more detail than the one on the right. This is not consistent, and this is only in areas where there is more light. So let's take a look here. Again, we've got the staircase going up. The green sign here for radius that is properly lit by the light coming out of the windows is definitely more legible on the 48 megapixel shot. However, if we pan a bit more to something that is in shadow or has less direct light on it, like this tree here, check out what the sensor does to the leaves. The leaves are actually less defined. There's less detail in the 48 megapixel image versus the 12 megapixel. And remember, they're not one to one. The only picture that's 1:1 is the one that's on the right. This picture is at 200% zoom, so everything's actually being stretched even more. So let's pan over again and take a look at these stairs real quick. So stairs and the fire hydrant. The sign definitely looks cleaner on 48 megapixels. The staircase itself and the steps, look at the detail of these steps right there. Yes, for pixel peeping and for getting the most out of your drone, this is just something that I needed to know for myself, and that is, what's the best way to shoot at night? Do I want to shoot at 12 megapixels or 48 megapixels? Clearly at 48 megapixels, things that have enough light are perfect. Things that are in shade have a lot less detail. The most perfect spot to show to you is this tree right here. This tree is our example of definition. So really quickly, let's start at the top of the branch here. 48 megapixels, this top branch is way more detailed, right? Look at that branch, it has way more detail. You can see the bumps on the branch. As we go down the branch to the tree, oh, hello, stop jumping around. There we go. Top branch, bottom branch. Top branch, very sharp, very clear, a lot less detail. Moving down though, look at the actual stem of the tree that's in shade. It doesn't have as much light on it. Even at double the zoom, you can see that it has more detail. And then take a look at the grill and the pipe that's behind the tree. In the shaded area, there's actually more detail in the 12 megapixel image at 200% zoom versus 100% at 48 megapixels. As soon as you move down into a better lit area, it starts to become fairly even though this railing is still pretty darn clear. But once you go to something that is brightly lit, you start to see the extra detail that the 48 megapixel sensor captures. And that's still not 100%, but you can kind of get the idea. So the lesson that we have learned, and that I have learned myself, and I'm sharing with everybody here, and hopefully it helps you out when you're taking pictures at night, is if you're taking photos of something that is fairly well illuminated, 48 megapixel is still king. But if you're taking pictures of something that is mostly in shade, something that is fairly dark, something that is not having a lot of direct light on it, the 12 megapixel image is actually going to be a little bit sharper with a little bit better contrast. Let's take another quick look here. I wanted to take a look at this because this is now at 1600 ISO, and that's where you're more likely to be shooting at. We're still at 1 second, and again, the picture that's on the left is 12 megapixels, and on the right is the enhanced 48 megapixel shot. What I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom in on this building here in the top corner. Again, 200% on the left, and we've got 100% on the right. And 1600 ISO, the noise pattern is a little bit smaller, tiny bit smaller in the 48 megapixel shot, but the level of detail at a higher ISO is actually superior on the 12 megapixel shot. Moving down to gate K here, come on, hello. Same thing. There's our two lights, there's our stop sign. Very close. And then let's look at the cars that are in complete shadow. Let's instead look at this tree here up top here. The tree that's up top, and look at the difference. So 48 megapixel in shade versus 48 megapixel in a brightly lit environment. So against the night sky, the 48 megapixel shot at 100% versus this one here at 200% is still softer. We can try reading a sign. I believe there's a sign up here somewhere where we can read. Let's zoom in on this Concord, and there is a warning sign right next to it. Let's do it on both sides. Well, let's zoom in. Let's take a look. Is there a huge difference? No. But once again, the 12 megapixel shot at low resolution, at 12 megapixel shot at low light, at high ISO, or even at ISO 400 makes no difference and is almost identical, if not slightly superior when it comes to contrasty areas like this branch up here. Just as much detail, but you've got a smaller file to work with, doesn't take up as much space, and it seems to have more detail in it. So whatever that DJI is using on the Mavic Air to generate the 48 megapixel picture is definitely slightly messing up the quality when you're shooting in low light. When you've got enough light, it looks fantastic. But when you're shooting in low light, dial down to 12 megapixels because it's not going to give you enough of a difference for your resolution. Look at this building here. Even at 200% zoom, those balconies are better defined. Really speaks for itself. 12 megapixel versus 48. Right now I have no incentive to shoot at nighttime photos with the drone at 48 megapixels. The files will be bigger and the resolution gain is really negligible. The ISO noise is a little smaller, but you lose so much detail. Maybe I've got a defective drone, maybe there's going to be a firmware update, but I can't test that out. I've done what I could with my drone. It's up to you. Grab the files from the description, they're there, and you can check them out for yourself. And while you're grabbing those files, make sure you drop me a like and subscribe to the channel so I can make more videos like this for you.